30 seconds.
Okay.
That's okay with everyone.
I'll just wait here.
Perfect. Hi, good evening, everyone. I am Marina Rossi. I'm Director of Graduate Studies at the Department of Economics at the University of Brasilia. And it's a great pleasure to have Professor McCloskey as a guest speaker to our community today. Before we start, I'm gonna give you brief instructions. You can choose, we're gonna have interpretation. So if you wish to hear in Portuguese or in English, you can choose. There is an icon at the Zoom, and you can choose if you wish to hear it in Portuguese or English. You can also, Professor Deirdre will speak for us, and then we're going to open for some questions, and I'm going to address the questions to her. So you can write in the chats the questions, and I will follow them through, and then I'm gonna read them afterwards. And to start our event, I would like to first call Professor Maria Emilia Machado Teles Valte. She's the Dean of Research and Innovation at our university, and she would like to speak to us today.
Good night,
Recording
Marina.
in progress.
Good night, Professor Deirdre. I will speak in Portuguese. I apologize for that.
No, I love to hear Portuguese.
Thank you. I will speak a bit for the students and people who are listening to us. So I will change the language. Boa noite a todos.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you are well in this context of in-person events, but still with the pandemics that requires all to take some good care. The vaccination is very advanced in Brazil, especially at UNB, at the federal district and in our region. I salute you all on behalf of our Dean of the University of Brasilia, Professor Márcia Abraão Moura. Initially, I would like to say hello to Professor José Márcio Carvalho, Professor FACE, Professor Marina Rossi,
Roberto Olerich,
Vice Director of FACE, Professor Olerich from the Department of Economics, and in particular, Professor Deirdre McCloskey, all of you who are watching us on YouTube and are participating here of this event. I am glad to be here today in this opening on behalf of Professor Márcia, because all the community of UNB, and in particular, everyone that participates in this management, we're treating matters, among others, about the internationalization, also the formation of people, research and innovation. This lecture shows the importance of internationalization, not just to our school, but to the University of Brasilia, and also to amplify the collaboration network for innovation in the international scope. Also, we are talking about innovation, especially in the annual government. We have approved our politics of 2022, and we have restructured, and we are trying to restructure the innovation at UNB. And I always repeat in the events that I have opportunity, we can't talk about innovation without basic research in our institutions, without forming people, without graduate students. It's in the academics that new positions come in the new research positions. It's possible to create innovation according to our politics It's based on 5 pillars: academics, government, private sector, and the 2 cross-sector, social and environment. If we don't allocate resources to the academics, it's to remove one of these pillars. And it is very limited, and it's what's happening in the 21st century. Science has been criticized greatly, especially in the pandemic context, especially in Brazil. All over the world, and here in Brazil, we have a wave of anti-science, and pandemics has expanded this distance between people. And in this moment, we are suffering the consequences of this disease, although there are vaccines already. And we are also regretting the loss of 150,000 lives. And I would like to highlight the role of the UNB and other federal universities towards science, like Butantan and Fiocruz had in the pandemics, presenting multidisciplinary projects in all the knowledge areas. This on the other side, has helped us to rescue the development role of our country. There was a lot of talk about science, and the scientists gave a lot of interviews in the news, and it helped the society, especially in Brazil, to understand our role of researchers. So it was an opportunity to justify the resources that are allocated to our institutions. I would like to, on behalf of the University of Brasilia, to welcome Professor Deirdre McCloskey. And also, I assure you that her lecture will contribute a lot to our university for reflections in the area, and hoping that new research projects are built with the professor, expanding our collaboration network with this great researcher. I would like to congratulate the organizers of this event on behalf of Professor Márcio and Marina and Roberto Elerito from the Department of Economics. Once more, the College of Economics at UNB that has contributed so much to undergraduate students and graduate students developed. I hope
what has changed and what has not possam ter novos insights, novos caminhos.
I hope that we have new ways to think, new ways of research, and new position decisions, highlighting that the science in Brazil, in a general way, happens through our graduation programs in the public universities, and should consolidate and amplify the collaboration through events like this. I wish you all a very good event. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Maria Emilia. Now I'm going to give the floor
the director of our School of Business and Economics, José Márcio Carvalho, who made this event possible.
Okay, Dr. McCloskey, it's an honor to receive you at the University of Brasilia. We are at the Faculty of Economics, Administration, Accountancy, and Public Policies Management, one of the biggest unities of the university. We are a growing school, let's say, at the University of Brasilia. And I always say that we are a confederation of several republics, because our departments tend to be very independent from each other. And we are in an effort to internationalize our activities. We had already consolidated programs in management, accountancy, economics, and we are increasing our partnership. But we need to have more international partners. So this initiative from the Department of Economics is a very important process to walk more in that direction. It's an immense pleasure to receive you in our faculty, just because your prominence as academic, but also how you conduct your academic life. And it's very important for us to have a contact with such a prominent academic. So please welcome in our university and faculty.
Obrigado.
You are welcome.
Thank you, Professor José Márcio. I would like on next call Professor Roberto Ellery. He's the chair of our department, the Department of Economics. Roberto.
Well, at first I would like to welcome Professor Deirdre McCloskey to took her time to talk with us. I am myself a reader of the professor and a student of her work as a researcher. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity. And also I will ask the license and her permission to talk in Portuguese from now on, so I can better express myself and reach a broader audience of students that may be listening to us right now. She just show us that she's a Portuguese speaker as well, because she can say obrigado, she can say anything in Portuguese.
You know, for a long time, I would say obrigado.
See?
I realized, oh, wait a second.
Now you are a native speaker. So I bet she will be very comfortable with Portuguese, and to say to us, she likes to the sound of the way we talk.
Oh, I love the sound of Portuguese.
As Marina, I'm from Northeast, and I'm talk and sing at the same. So, so you see, I will take this lines. So I will change to the Portuguese channel. Just a second. Bom, rapidamente eu queria fazer a saudação.
Quickly, I would like to salute all of our students, all of our teachers, everyone that is following us here. I am very pleased to have this opportunity to participate in this event, because we are here with this researcher that has a great impact in our society about our methods, about how to do or not to do economics. We really like to work with our specific areas and our models, and sometimes we have to stop to think that if this is the right way. This is an area that is very important about economics and methodology. It's impossible not to mention Professor Roberto Modolski, which has a very important work in this area. And something that I miss greatly is to see him and to exchange ideas with him. So it's very important issue in a very important moment where we are questioning everything and including our area. I could not left out of my thank yous, Professor José Guilherme, which gave us this idea and made everything possible. Thank you very much. You are a great person here in this department, and once more you have helped us to make a difference. I hope that we are at the end of this period, of this distancing period where everything is remote, and I hope that this is a transition period, and I hope that next month, according to our planning in our faculty, we're back in person. We're very happy. One of the biggest craziness is that we heard that we're happy outside of university, and this is crazy because I can't be happy away from the place that I chose to live my life, to work. So I'm very happy with the possibility to come back in person. And I already want to invite Professor Deirdre McCloskey so she can come here in person, maybe in the second semester of this year or next year, so she can have an opportunity to talk and we can advance in these ideas. So I would like to thank you all of you who have organized this, Rafael, Marina, and also the Faculty of Economics. It was an initiative from these people that allowed us to have this event, the Dean, Professor Maria Emilia. She is a partner of our Faculty of Economics. We're not seeing each other, but things are moving, things are happening. So I would like to give the floor now back to Professor Marina Rossi. She is an organizer of this event and she has a fundamental role in this moment. And here I'm very excited to listen to the words of Professor McCloskey. I am really excited about this. I hope that all of you who are listening to us today know the importance of this event.
For your words. I'm very honored to have the opportunity to introduce Professor McCloskey today. She's a distinguished professor emerita of economics and of history, and professor emerita of English and of communication, adjunct in classics and philosophy at the University of Illinois in Chicago since 2000. She received her training as an economist at Harvard. She worked as a professor in many top-tier universities, including the University of Chicago, where she was tenured in 1975. She has written over 20 books and more than 400 articles about economic theory, economic history, philosophy, rhetoric, feminism, ethics, and law. She currently describes herself as, quotation, literary, quantitative, postmodern, free market, progressive Episcopalian, ex-Marxoid, Miss Western woman from Boston who once was a man. Not conservative, I'm a Christian classical liberal, end quotation. Her books include The Rat of Economics, The Cult of Statistical Significance, How the Standard Errors Cost Us Jobs, Justice, and Lives, a trilogy about economic history, The Bourgeois Era. In 2019, the University of Chicago Press published a third edition of the classic manuscript Economical Writing, and also the book Crossing, a transgender memoir. In 2020, she published with Alfredo Mingardi the book The Myth of the Entrepreneurial State. In 2021, she published the book Bettering Humanomics, a new and old approach to economic science. And in 2022, she's now about to publish the book Beyond Positivism, Behaviorism, and Neo-Institutionalism in Economics. Professor McCloskey is a much needed fresh air in the Brazilian debate about economics. She's now writing weekly articles for Folha de São Paulo, and her contribution will undoubtedly raise the level of the debate in Brazil about economics, history, and politics, not only in academia, but also for the general public. In her 5 columns already published, she spoke about Ukraine, and that the choice now is not about left and right, but about liberty and tyranny, about the ordem e progresso in our flag and its positive origin and spontaneous order. I imagine Hayek here. Inflation, with a great joke about Brazil. Quando os astronautas americanos chegaram à Lua, encontraram brasileiro. Espantados, perguntaram como eles
When the American astronauts got to the moon, I found a Brazilian. They asked me, how did you get to the moon? I got a ride with the Brazilian prices. But how are you going to come back? I'm going to get a ride in the exchange rate.
In some sense, I could say she's doing an education crusade in Brazil, where some bad ideas never die, with contribution such as The Myth of the Entrepreneurial State, her perfectly titled book. And then we have the topic of this evening's talk. I have over and over recommended The Rhetoric of Economics to many of my students, even lending my copy of the book to a few. The Rhetoric of Economics, as our seminar title indicates, was published almost 40 years ago and is still as necessary as before, with so many of her discussions in the book still going on. She has 2 new books that fit this topic. Not only her message was not fully listened by economists, but by all other social sciences. The American Statistical Association in 2016 published a statement on p-values, basically placing them in their due place and trying to call attention to a cult of statistical significance, the title of another of her book with Steven Ziliak. So pervasive nowadays. And without further delay, please welcome our guest speaker, the great Deirdre McCloskey. Deirdre, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Obrigada. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm only sorry, I'm not actually there. I haven't ever been to Brasilia. You'll notice, though, that I stutter, as did Marilyn Monroe, a fact that is not widely known. Joe Biden and Churchill also did. So you'll have to grow accustomed to that. I'll become more fluent as I talk. So it's been, yes, almost 40 years since I published an article called The Rhetoric of Economics in the Journal of Economic Literature. And then subsequently a book of the same title. And then I wrote 2 other books on this subject. If you had to summarize that first book in 1985, it would say, economists, dears, are poets. They use, as poets do, they use metaphors. Their models are comparisons of one realm, say mathematics, to another, say the housing market in Sao Paulo, and it's a somewhat radical comparison that a curve on a diagram could illuminate, could be interesting, could sing, as Al Harberger says, sing about such a human event as the housing market. Now, that was the first book. And then in 1990, I wrote another book saying that furthermore, economists are novelists, but don't know it. They operate with stories. They tell stories. The endless story of Brazil, the sad joke about Brazil, is the story that it's always the nation of the future, always. Brazil is the nation of the future forever. I think the reason that Brazil has not succeeded as much as it could has a lot to do with the first book, that is incorrect metaphors and models to think about the economy. So poets and novelists. And then I have a third book in 1994 called, which having made my colleagues very angry in economics because they didn't like to be compared to poets and novelists. We're scientists, they said. Scientists are not poets and novelists. Scientists are well, something else. I think they're wrong. I think it's true what I'm saying about metaphors and stories is just as true of chemistry and physics and biology as it is about economics. But in any case, I got people so angry at me that they wrote articles attacking this. And so in 1994, I have this third book. You can think of it as a sort of trilogy, where answering the critics. So this period from around 1980 to 1994 was my rhetorical period. I get bored with the project I'm doing in about 10 years. Every 10 years, I have to change what I do. That doesn't mean I'm against what I did before. I continue to be an economist and an economic historian. But this period was when I realized slowly, it took me a long time, that what we call in English the humanities, and I think you use more or less the same term in Portuguese, or arts, as they call it in Britain, are an essential element of science. Now that sounds strange to an English-speaking ear, but I don't think it's as strange in other languages, including Portuguese. I mean, for example, in German, the word Wissenschaft, science, means inquiry. It means systematic inquiry. So the Germans speak about Geisteswissenschaft, which in English sounds very strange indeed. It says spirit science, sciences, Geisteswissenschaften. I mean, what spirit sciences? Oh, what's that? In fact, the word Geist is cognate, is a cousin of the English word ghost. So you could also call it, make a translation, ghostly science. But all it means in German is spirit, the human spirit. And it is the ordinary German word for the humanities. So in all the languages I've looked into, and I've asked people who speak Tamil and Japanese and Turkish and all kinds of other languages what their science word is. In all those, it turns out that the science word means inquiry. So you can have classical science, the study of the ancient Mediterranean world. And then the idea of social sciences, which often angers our colleagues in the physical sciences. They say, oh, economics isn't a science, and they get very indignant. They say, I'm a scientist, I'm a physicist, you're just, I don't know what you are. That's extremely foolish. I was also, as was mentioned, a professor of English, of the English language, and of our topic this evening, namely rhetoric. I always stutter on the word rhetoric, which is among my favorite words. And my other favorite word is liberty. And I usually stutter on that too. So you can make what you want of that psychologically. So so I turned in this kind of middle period of my career to the serious study of the humanities. And it was very slow. Over a long period of time, up to really the present, I'm still discovering things about this fruitful idea that the humanities have to do with economics and with the sciences more generally. It was slow going because I was trained as an economist. I'm a quantitative, mathematically trained, economist, and I still believe in numbers. I still think that numbers are often what we need to decide on the next movement in economic policy in Brazil, or what caused the great enrichment that Brazil has had to since, say, the year 1800. Quantities matter in science and in everything else sometimes. Quantities matter in How old you are matters for love and marriage, for example. Quantities, how much money you have, matters for your life. It's not as if numbers, that I've turned away from numbers. What I've done is I've added to numbers words. And both numbers and words, I concluded a long time ago. I hear this is crucial. Do not come with their own interpretation. If you say to me, or if I say to you, let's make me the person. If I say to you, it's a lovely day today in Brazil. And I say, and you say, well, how do you know that? And I answer, hear what I answer. I say 4, the number 4. And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, 4. It means 4. You say, what are you talking about? Is it a good day or not? I mean, tell me. And I say to you, what? Don't you believe in numbers? Are you one of these non-quantitative people? And you can see that conversation is crazy. In order for a number to mean something, it's got to have a context. It's got to have human questions, often of a humanistic character, that surround it. If you want to know the population of Rio or something, you have to make a humanistic decision of what a citizen of Rio is. That qualitative decision comes before you can count. I mean, a more interesting example in economics is the whole question of what we should use as the measure of economic success. Should it be real national income conventionally measured per person? I happen to think that that's a very important measure, and I would defend it in many ways. But it's not by any means the only possible measure of the success, the economic success of a country or of a person. So you see, there's this qualitative dimension as well as quantitative, and that's what I finally learned. That's what took me a long time to learn. I think it's somewhat interesting to know how it all started. I was educated at Harvard in economics. I was an undergraduate, but this is a long time ago. I graduated from Harvard College in 1964, and then I went to graduate school at Harvard as well. But in 1968, I got a job at the University of Chicago. And that period, the period really of the 1970s in Chicago, was a time when the University of Chicago was, in my opinion, certainly the most creative economics department in the world. The competitors at the time were MIT and Cambridge University in England. Harvard was not in the competition. Harvard at the time I was there was not a very good department of economics for reasons we don't have to go into. But of course, Harvard was the home of what you can call crudely, it's a little bit crude, a socialist way of looking at economics. That what we need to do as economists is to be social engineers who interfere or regulate the economy. This was the view of Paul Samuelson at MIT, Paul Samuelson, by the way, just in case you need to know, was my mother's long standing mixed doubles tennis partner. I mean, I don't see why you'd need to know that, but it's true. So my mother and father knew Samuelson very well. I didn't ever know him, but I knew his work very well. I was taught out of his, essentially out of his elementary text and his advanced text, his famous book, The Foundations of Economic Analysis. And that view of economics is that planning works, and that there are very intelligent people in Washington or Moscow or Brasilia, which I also stutter on, you see, who can guide the economy. This is the view that is currently advocated by Mariana Mazzucato. That's how I was educated, is in this Harvard atmosphere. And then my first job, where I stayed for 12 years, was at the other pole, at least in modern economics, the University of Chicago. And so that created in my mind a contrast. The Chicago school was liberal in not so much in the Brazilian sense, but the European sense. It was laissez-faire, whereas Harvard was not. So it was Harvard versus Chicago. By the way, I taught for 10 years the graduate course in microeconomics at the University of Chicago. And so I taught personally a lot of the Chicago boys in Brazil and Chile. The current Minister of Finance in Brazil was a student of mine. So I gradually came away from teaching them this engineering, let's guide the economy view of the economy. And I gradually came to understand the merits, the virtues, the good things about leaving the economy alone. Now, you can see that there's a rhetorical problem here. And that was basically what motivated me. By a rhetorical problem, I do not mean ornamented language or fancy talk. Rhetoric means, as Aristotle said, the available non-coercive means of persuasion, of changing people's minds. You know, you can, as happened in Brazil under the generals, you can hold a gun to people's head and change their behavior, at least, if not their minds, or you could throw them out of airplanes. But what I call sweet talk is what happens for the most part in a free country like Brazil now to change people's minds. Newspapers, conversations, lectures, sweet talk. Sweet talk is persuasion. Now, I had two kinds of economic persuasion. I had the Harvard model, or the Harvard conclusion, and the Chicago conclusions. And they were in tension. So in 1980, a great professor of English at the University of Chicago named Wayne Booth said to me, Donald, that was my name, Don, would you speak to my undergraduate class about the rhetoric of economics? I think he asked me because I had a reputation in 1980 of being, I don't know, somewhat more open-minded than many of my colleagues in economics at the University of Chicago, not just in economics, but in business and law. And so Wayne asked me, and I said, yeah, I'll do that. What is it? What is the rhetoric of economics? And Wayne said, oh, well. And he gave me books to read. And it turns out that there was in the 50s and 60s and 70s and into the 80s, in the humanities, a turn towards rhetoric, also in departments of communication, such as we have in the United States. And what that was, as Aristotle said, the study of the available means of persuasion. So and that was a new idea to me, that there wasn't, and then I also started studying the philosophy of science. And the old-fashioned philosophy of science that I knew from high school chemistry was essentially logical positivism, which flourished in Vienna circa 1920. And it said science is a machine. It's easy. You just follow the method of science and you get scientific results. Most economists still believe that. But another intellectual development in the 50s and 60s and 70s that I knew basically nothing about as an economist was the history, sociology, and philosophy of science after Thomas Kuhn. Thomas Kuhn, the great historian of science at Princeton, pointed out that scientists are humans. I know that's shocking, but that's what he said. And lots of others, Paul Feyerabend and a friend of mine in sociology with whom I'm right now composing a paper, Harry Collins and lots of others, showed that science was not this open and shut thing. And then I go over to this humanistic side. It was a matter of sweet talk, of persuasion. You could almost say that the discovery was that thinking about economic science has a rhetoric and it has a sociology, both. So then I went slightly crazy about this stuff and wrote all these books and articles. To answer the question of our session this evening, what's changed? Well, nothing has changed. Even though I was a prominent economic historian and economist who was saying these things and was joined by people like Arya Klammer in Holland and Don Lavoie, the Austrian economist, at George Mason, so many other people. It didn't change anything substantive in economics. Economics has continued to develop in this positivistic, numbers come with their own interpretation. You don't need to worry about the humanities way. I don't think that science should change radically just because someone like me waves a red flag and says, no, wait a second, something's wrong here. You people aren't understanding what you're doing, as for example, in this matter of tests of statistical significance, which dominates econometrics, and the economists don't know what they're doing. It's completely wrong. What you learned in your statistics course is wrong. And I'm speaking as someone who loves theoretical and applied statistics, but the technique of testing by t-tests, say, is mistaken. It's your R-squares, for that matter, is simply scientifically wrong. Essentially, no one has paid attention. And as I said, science shouldn't change just quickly. If science changed every time anyone said, oh, maximizing profit is not what everyone does, so therefore economics is wrong, and then we abandoned all we knew about the economy before, that would not be a good way to run a science. So the conservatism of economics is not something that I'm angry about. I'm disappointed. I wish they all said, oh, Deirdre said such and such. That's the end. Oh, well, let's all do Deirdre McCloskey studies. But I've come to another conclusion about the history of economic thought. That's very much the point here. And it is that Adam Smith, now look, watch. I'm a Anglican, I'm a Christian, so I always cross myself when I mention Adam Smith. Adam Smith, the master of the Scottish Enlightenment, as against, by the way, the French Enlightenment. The conclusion of my column in Folha this week is that you Brazilians ought to spend more time thinking about the Scottish Enlightenment than the French Enlightenment. Like most of us, we're obsessed with the French Enlightenment and reason. But the Scottish Enlightenment was about liberty, which is the other half of the Enlightenment story, 18th century Enlightenment. And Adam Smith said repeatedly, over and over again, that persuasion of free people is what, now hear this, the economy is about. The economy. The economy is not about structures of exploitation or structures of this, that, and the other thing. The economy is about sweet talk. Arjo Klammer and I, in 1995, or 6, I think it was, we made a calculation, I hear this, of what percentage of labor income, the income of people who get paid to work like you and me, is paid for because of the exercise of sweet talk. That is, what percentage of what a member of the police or a teacher or a manager or a farm laborer or a soldier, what percentage of their marginal product, express it that way, is accounted for by their skill or their skill in sweet talk. And Arjo and I came up with a what we regard as a very sensible way of estimating this, and discovered, and I hear this, it was 1/4 of labor income was accounted for by sweet talk. Our colleagues in marketing understand this, although they don't know that what they're doing is ancient Greek rhetoric. But in any case, 1/4, and that's not advertising. That's mainly about management. mainly about having bosses. In a free society where you're free to move from your job, you're not a wage slave. That's a very foolish phrase that our friends on the left have. You're not a wage slave. You can move away if you want to. It's not easy always, but you can. So you're not a slave, whereas slaves can't move. But you are, if you're managed, your manager has to treat you like a free person. Your manager can't take out a whip and beat you to make you work harder. Whereas with slaves, you can't. So the economy works on rhetoric. Now, this is something that it took me a long time to understand. I kept saying to my friends who would, when we were discussing this, I said, economics works on sweet talk. The science itself works on sweet talk, which is, I think, obviously true. And they would reply to me, people like Arya Klammer and Don Lavoie would say, yeah, but it's also true of the economy. And so gradually in the 90s and 2000s, I kind of got it. I'm kind of a slow thinker. And surprise, surprise, I turned it to economic history. And I discovered in a second trilogy, I seem to specialize in doing 3 books at once, or not at once, but in sequence, in a second trilogy called The Bourgeois Era, published in 2006 and 2010, and the last one in 2016, I came to the conclusion that we economists have got economic growth all wrong. That what actually caused economic growth was liberalism, in a word. Was a free society in which people could try out things. As the English say, have a go, try out things, and could speak freely, could have the kind of conversation that after I stop talking, which I soon will, we can have a free conversation in which, as the philosopher Paul Feyerabend put it, anything goes. So I've come to the conclusion that we shouldn't throw away mathematics, statistics, economic theory, mathematics. Those are all wonderful tools for thinking about the economy. Quantitative questions are often important. I'm not so sure that abstract general equilibrium or something is of any use, but still, I'm not, I don't hate it. But that we need to radically supplement economics so that it goes back to understanding what the blessed Adam Smith understood, that the economy is a field of language, a field of persuasion. He's in the student notes for his lectures on jurisprudence, Smith said, the offer of a shilling, that is some money, that seems to have such an obvious meaning to us, is actually an argument, is persuasion. To persuade, to sweet talk the person to do something we want her to do. And he made language and prices the same thing, and they are. So the kind of economics that I've come to advocate, I do not expect my colleagues to stop what they're doing and go and follow me. I'm not Jesus. You remember, he said, if you are a Christian, you'll know this. He said, give all your money to the poor and follow me. And some did, most didn't. So I'm not optimistic about this conception of mine, which a few other economists like Bart Wilson and the Nobel economist Vernon Smith are also advocating. I'm not sure it's going to change economics much. I wish it would. I think we would have a much stronger science. I advocate what Bart calls humanomics. Economics with the humans left in. I emphasize that this introduction of humanism, history, philosophy, I stutter on that word too, literature, rhetoric, sweet talk, persuasion, democracy, a society in which people listen to each other instead of shouting at each other, which, by the way, is characteristic of the commercial economy. A person in business who doesn't listen to the market is going to do very badly. That's what we should be thinking about. So suppose I end with the following thought. Liberalism, such as Adam Smith and John Stuart Mill and Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman and Robert Nozick and others have advocated, laissez-faire, get the government largely out of the economy instead of going on and on, adding more and more policies, is the reason we're rich in the modern world. Earlier on, I said Brazil has not been as successful economically as it easily could be. But on the other hand, Brazil, like much of the rest of the world, is enormously richer than it was a couple of centuries ago, or even 1 century ago. The reason that happened is not government. It's not coercion. It's not planning. It's the ideas that individuals have imagined. The automobile, the cultivation of sugar, whatever it is, it's human ideas that come out of conversation, even a conversation inside your own head. That's what made us rich. It wasn't investment. It wasn't foreign trade. It wasn't government planning. It wasn't railroads. It was the liberal idea that you too can start a business or move from the Northeast, or in other words, act as a free person. In fact, and here's my last statement. I want people to start thinking of liberalism as adultism, grown-upism. Let's do it, adultism. Because what distinguishes laissez-faire, free markets, is that they treat such a framework for economic policy treats people as grown-ups. It doesn't leave them alone and let them starve, but it treats them as grown-ups. Whereas every other political philosophy from Catholic social teaching to communism, to Keynesianism, to anything you want to name, fascism, all of them treat people as incompetent children. So I ask you to adopt liberalism, to adopt a rhetorical way of looking at our science, our wonderful science, and at the economy itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Deirdre. It's great. As I said, I could continue here listening to you. And now I will open for some questions. They were written here, so I'll read them to you. And if you can address them, that would be great. The first question, it's, an economist is a storyteller. However, we see ourselves as impartial observers because of the mathematical and statistical methods. When an economist makes a model, he tells a story using classical logic or other hard science methods. Nevertheless, their models are not better than in other social sciences, despite the more scientific considered method. What do you think economics could learn from other social sciences? What is the future, if there is any, for economics different from the current state?
Well, that has lots of dimensions, that question does. There's an underlying assumption, though, that I do not agree with, that the physical and biological sciences are hard, whereas economics or anthropology is soft. And I just don't think, I think that's not correct. And this history, philosophy, and sociology of science that I talked about after the Second World War showed that hard science is not hard. Science is rhetorical all the way down. On the other hand, I think the proposal suggested by the person who asked is correct, that economics, which loves to imperialize other subjects, my colleague at Chicago, Gary Becker, was delighted to bring economic models into sociology. And I myself, by the way, at that time, I was working on English open fields in the Middle Ages, and I was bringing economics into history and anthropology, essentially. We economists have loved to tell other people what to do, but we could learn a lot from listening. The old joke is that there's a reason God gave us 2 ears, but 1 mouth. So it's 2-to-1 in favor of listening. Let's take the case of law, for example. The law and economics movement of my friend Posner and Ronald Coase was to import economic ideas into law. Actually, it was Posner who didn't actually ever study economics. It's Posner who was the big enthusiast for this imperialism. Whereas Coase was a much more sensible person. Coase actually knew, well, actually, so did Posner. He became a federal judge. But all right, if we listen to lawyers, we'll learn about their conception of justice. The economist's conception, look, economics is always about the future. We're asked to make economic decisions now about future possibilities. That's a deep problem in economics, but it's what we do. It's what we're talking about. Whereas justice in the lawyer's sense is about the past. It's about what it asks the question, was what happened just yesterday? Whereas the economist says, what will be efficient tomorrow? Now, I think humans are humans. And in a humanomics, we've got to consider the lawyer's definition of justice. We don't need to abandon the economist's question. But if we're going to be serious about a social science, we have to include both. But I could do this about anthropology and sociology and political science and history and et cetera, et cetera. 2 ears, 1 mouth.
So thank you. The next question is the illusion of guiding economics based on a belief in a machine-like economy? As the economy does not work like a machine, do you think there could be any beneficial change in economics training? What should it be?
Well, that's a very important point. That's what I learned from Austrian economics. This book that I mentioned in 1990 was called "If You're So Smart: The Narrative of Economic Expertise." Again, it was about economics, about the storytelling, the novelistic character of our field. But the joke in the title is an old proverb in economics. There's probably one in Portuguese of a similar character, which says, "If you're so smart, why aren't you rich?" And that sounds like just a kind of a silly joke, but it's not. It's a legitimate question to ask of anyone who says they can guide the economy. If you think like Mazzucato does, and as Keynes did, John Maynard Keynes, that it's appropriate for economists by what Mariana says is what does she call it? She says she talks about pondering. we sort of sit in Brasilia and we ponder. We sit in our office and ponder. We think about the economy, and we can then make investments that are good, make investments in innovation that are good. That's her line. Mariana, ¿por qué? Why aren't you rich? Why aren't you infinitely rich? This is, I like to use the analogy that Bart Wilson also uses of Goethe's great poem, Faust. And Faust wanted to have knowledge because he says early on in the poem, "I don't have any Geld." I don't have any money. It's German. I have any money. I've all this knowledge, but it hasn't done me any good. So he ends up going to the devil. And he sells his soul for the knowledge that will make him rich. And no economist has that knowledge, or else all the economists will be rich. And I'm telling you, I'm a good example of a non-rich economist. Please send money. So I think that I'm working on a paper which I'm going to present in London in a couple of weeks called, here's what it's called: The Near Impossibility of Policy. The Near Impossibility of Policy. Adam Smith's word for policy was often police, because that was an 18th century English thing. That's what the word meant. Well, that's what it still means. I'm from the government, and I'm going to help you whether you like it or not.
Thank you. So the next question, how do you join Popper falsification principle with the vision that economics is sweet talk?
Well, because Popper is wrong about science. Most economists, the furthest they've got in the philosophy of science is Karl Popper. And, you know, I admire them that at least they're not sticking with, I don't know, Francis Bacon or something. They've gotten, as we say in baseball, they've gotten to first base, or in soccer terms, they've got the ball into the opposing half. Okay, good. But they're not scoring goals. They're not at home base. They haven't gotten all the way around. Popperianism as philosophy, history, sociology of science is very naive. I'm not just saying that. That's the conclusion of modern historians, philosophers, and sociologists of science. So you got to go way beyond Popper. And when you get beyond Popper, see, in Popper, it's sort of this little machine falsification. And my dear colleague, Milton Friedman, and my mother's longtime mixed doubles tennis partner, Paul Samuelson, both believed in this kind of talk. And it's implicit in tests of significance in econometrics. And if you allow me to be a little bit harsh, unkind, it's silly. We don't persuade each other mechanically. We're humans. That doesn't mean we're bad people or something. It means that there's more than hypothesis and test. The hypothesis and test stuff is helpful. I mean, it's not the worst thing you can talk about. And sometimes I've used it myself, and as part of the argument of science is perfectly all right. The problem is that Popper and the people he thought he was attacking, namely his countrymen in Vienna in the 1920s, like Wittgenstein Mark I, there's a machine, there's a little logical machine. And I could go into this in some detail. In 1914, the great French, is this French? No. But there are great problems with this machine. Economics shouldn't have a naive philosophy of science, but it does.
Thank you. So the next question, I'm going to change here for the YouTube questions. What are your ideas about biological theory of evolution and concepts like natural selection, genetic flows?
You know, I'm in favor of it. I'm a Christian, but I'm not a fool. So I believe in biological evolution. I'm not Jerry Falwell or a fundamentalist, a foolish fundamentalist about this. And I admire biology as a model of thinking. And it's worth reminding ourselves that Darwin was inspired by economics. He says so on the first page of his autobiography. He says he was reading Malthus for pleasure one evening, which gives you an idea of the kind of person Darwin was to read Malthus for pleasure. And it suddenly hit him that this survival of the fittest in the economy could be applied to the survival of the fittest in the biological world. And indeed, Malthus himself had been in turn inspired 30 years earlier by survival of some species in biology. So there's this, as the great economist Armin Alchian pointed out, there's this dualism of biology and economics. Now, on the other hand, I'm not a member of the German historical school, which said that everything's evolution. And I'm certainly not an enthusiast for the philosopher Daniel Dennett at Tufts University in the United States, who says that ideas are memes. This is Dawkins's foolish talk. Ideas are memes, and that's there. The memes are an analogy to genes, memes and genes. And he says ideas evolve the way memes do, the way genes do. I don't believe, in other words, in any kind of biological reductionism. And indeed, I think there are numerous biologists who do not believe in it. So it's a complicated issue, but those are my views. I think there's a lot to be learned from modern mathematical biology in economics, because as Alfred Marshall said, the forest is composed of trees that grow up, by which he meant an industry is composed of firms that grow up.
Thank you. So I'm gonna, we have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna just select some of them because I know your time, that you've been speaking to us.
I can shorten my answers if you want, and we can get through more of them.
Maybe.
I'll try to confine my answers from now on to 2 sentences.
Perfect. I think then we can get through them. So what's your opinion on Brazilian liberalism?
I'm all for it. There are hundreds of branches of Students for Liberty in Brazil. Yes.
Yeah. So there's been a convergence between economics, psychology, political science, and other humanities. Which touch points would you highlight among the study fields, and what could be enhanced for the better understanding of our world?
Well, I'm in favor of using your ears, but I'm not quite sure what the questioner is referring to. Okay. If she means the bringing of economic thinking into political science, I think there's a little bit to be learned there, but we should be listening to the talk in political science about ideology, ideas,
so
identity, passion.
Perfect. So another question is, if science in general is sweet talk, where do you draw the line between science and religion?
Well, I don't think you have to. I think it's I think it's a kind of, I think theology is scientific, because science in Portuguese means inquiry. And by the way, it meant that in English before the middle of the 19th century. And then some disputes at Oxford and Cambridge about chairs in chemistry. I think that's where this crazy, it's go look at the Oxford English Dictionary. Sense 5B is the modern understanding of science in English.
And so another question, you're saying that economic growth is due to human capital and freedom. So what do you think of Acemoglu, the idea of inclusive and exclusive institutions?
I gave a long review of Acemoglu's last book with James Robinson, which you may find in the somewhat obscure journals in which it was published, or on my website. And I came to the conclusion that Acemoglu is a statist. He wants the state to be big, and he's not a liberal. And I say, please stop it. We don't need bigger and bigger governments. So I'm against it. In fact, I've written a good deal in the last 10 years against what I call neo-institutionalism.
Perfect. So do you think, so just for last questions, do you think science and technology studies offer a useful paradigm for looking at economics?
Well, yes, because I think innovation is what made the modern world, not capital accumulation, not government guidance of science and technology, but innovation in people's heads. On the other hand, the word science and technology is as though it's a German word. Science and technology, poof, they're together. Most science has nothing to do with technology. Think about it. 95% of research in mathematics, for instance, has nothing to do with any practical matter and never will. Now, that doesn't mean I'm against mathematics in the same way that I say that poetry has very little to do with material improvements. Zero, I guess. But that doesn't mean I'm against poetry. This obsession with I can never remember, how does it go? Technology, there's a contraction. Technology, science, engineering. I always forget it. I don't know why. The acronym for the four subjects that are supposed to be so important for the economy. Can anyone help me with this?
STEM.
That's right, STEM. It's a confidence game, we say in English. It's a fraud. Most of science, say astronomy, has nothing to do with the economy. Science doesn't lead to most technology. This is a disagreement I have with my dear friend and ally in many of these things, Joe Mokir. Technology has to do with technology. Engineering has to do with technology for the most part, but mathematics, as I just told you, has nothing to do with it.
Sorry. Thank you. I think we got through a lot of questions. Maybe just to round up here. Some researchers say that the betterment of economics is much driven by forces of competing schools. Oscar Lange versus Mises on a debate of socialist calculation, salt water versus fresh water, and so on. What do you think nowadays are main competing views in economics and how they can advance our field?
Well, one of the main competing schools is neo-institutionalism, and another is behavioral economics, and another is what's it called? Brain economics. There's a term for it. And another is large data set econometrics, which has invaded my own field of economic history. And I think all of them are dead ends. All of them are scientific mistakes. And in my latest book from the University of Chicago Press, which you mentioned, I make the case against all of these, most particularly against neo-institutionalism. So I think we're making a big mistake in economics in rushing after this or that new materialism. That's our basic problem, I think, maybe that's a nice way to put it. The basic problem in economics is unlike Adam Smith got it right. Everyone after him got it wrong, almost everyone. The Austrian economists are as close to correct as any of the schools of economics, but even they got it wrong mostly and tend to drift back into materialism. Materialism is not how we got rich. Ideas is how we got rich. And the core idea is adultism or liberalism, a society of free people and free scientists attempting to understand the economy. And just one more point. The competition, which we often talk about, we talk about the competition of ideas and everything's going to work out. The problem is that the competition is fixed. If there are governmental interventions in it, for one thing, but it's fixed by the ideologies that I have argued against for 40 years of my colleagues like Robert Lucas, the great macroeconomist. They believe this positivistic story that Popper refined a little bit. And they believe that math is all you need. You can prove great social truths on a blackboard. They believe that econometrics can substitute for thinking. And they're all wrong, dears.
Professor Merkel, thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation, for taking the time to answer our questions, to expose your views. I'm all for liberalism myself, so I think it's very good to have people speak about it, and especially in Brazil, where we sometimes don't have that culture. We have to really fight for it. So thank you very much.
Not fight, sweet talk.
Sweet talk, perfect. Yes, use our words and our rhetoric. So thank you very much. We had many people listening to you, and so I'm very happy that we had this opportunity. I do hope that you are able to come visit us in person, and that we can continue the debate. And
anytime.
Thank you very much.
Okay, dears.
Thank you, everyone, for your time too. Great evening.
Ciao, ciao, bambini.
Thank you very much. Wonderful.
Okay, dears. Thank you, dear. Bye. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
Opa, tinha caído.